President Trump and top health officials are urging Americans to donate blood plasma if they have antibodies after recovering from the coronavirus. Skylar Henry has the latest from the White House.
Dr. Anthony Fauci.
For the first time in weeks, President Trump and Dr. Anthony Fauci came together publicly at the Red Cross in Washington.
My administration is partnering with commercial labs, insurers, and healthcare providers to encourage those who have had the virus to donate plasma. It's an important part of the entire response to this outbreak.
The show of solidarity comes as the U.S. surpassed 150,000 COVID-related deaths this week.
I'm once again urging all Americans to protect the elderly, socially distance, wear a mask.
The White House and congressional Democrats say they are still far apart on a Phase 4 coronavirus relief bill, despite dire economic news this week. The U.S. economy plunged a record-breaking 32.9% in the second quarter. And for the second week in a row, unemployment numbers are on the rise, with 1.4 million people filing for new benefits. The problem is likely to worsen, with millions of Americans set to lose their extra $600 weekly enhanced unemployment benefits after Friday. Calls for a short-term fix have so far been rejected by Democrats, who want a comprehensive measure.
Either our Democratic colleagues come to the table or the American people won't get the help.
We need to confront all of these crises. Senate Republicans hardly want to address any of them.
Meanwhile, President Trump is getting pushback over a tweet bashing universal mail-in voting and suggesting the November 3rd election be delayed.
The election will be held on the date set by Congress. And with regards to mail-in voting, in my state, we've had it for some time. It works extremely well.
Utah Senator Mitt Romney is one of several lawmakers working on separate proposals to continue supplemental unemployment benefits.
And Skylar Henry joins me now from the White House. Hi there, Skylar. What are the sticking points in these negotiations for a new relief package?
Well, Elaine, good evening to you. What we saw initially was that lawmakers wanted to make sure that there were some sort of unemployment benefit extensions put in place to help those millions of Americans out there who would be losing those $600 weekly enhancement unemployment checks that they had been receiving since the last coronavirus relief package. Those are set to expire tomorrow. And so that was one of the big things that I think all lawmakers and the president said that they did want to help out Americans. Unfortunately, though, because the Senate has adjourned for the weekend, it doesn't look like that will happen as the Senate will reconvene on Monday to address those concerns. But the big sticking point was not only that, but several measures of the budget altogether. Senate Republicans have said all along that what the Democrats have proposed was entirely too expensive. The multi-trillion-dollar bill that they passed in the House a few months ago, the Senate introduced a $1 trillion version of legislation to help in terms of this new coronavirus relief package. But still, though, many members of the GOP even said that what was being proposed wasn't even organized up into a certain point. And so lawmakers within their own party had to come to an accord before they could even properly present that to Democrats. And so now it's being positioned as this. The GOP has said that they want to do something in terms of that unemployment extension to help those millions of Americans. And so now the GOP is saying that, hey, listen, we want to just help out Americans and we can work out the rest of this bill later. But Democrats have said all along that they feel as though this needs to be an all or nothing piece of legislation here, that yes, they want to also see those unemployment benefit extensions happen, but they also want to address the other parts of the bill, and that includes getting money to local and state governments, that includes getting money to schools to help them reopen, and that also includes other measures as well that we just don't see that happening up until this point.
So, as you mentioned, the Senate has adjourned until Monday. These unemployment benefits expire Friday. What does that actually mean for the millions of Americans who are receiving that unemployment assistance?
Well, if anything, as I mentioned, you'll start to see those $600 checks go away. For one, if you hadn't already seen that, as this has been kind of a trickle effect over the past few days. But Friday is certainly the last day for these unemployment benefits that if you were receiving them. And so now there'll be a lull in terms of receiving any sort of compensation from the government. And so that means things like this. You have to remember that a lot of these people were relying on those extra $100 or so so to pay their bills, to pay their rent. And so when you think about that, you have to also think about evictions and foreclosures and things like that happening on people's homes and apartments. And that is something that is going away as well. We did hear from the president a few minutes ago who alluded to the fact that he would like to see an extension on those eviction moratoriums, but that isn't a part of the GOP proposed legislation at this point. Democrats said that they did want to see that happen, but right now it still isn't relatively clear as to what we will see as far as helping out people, not only with money compensation, but to prevent them from being put out on the streets there, Elaine.
Well, Skylar, let's talk a little bit about the latest economic data. As you mentioned, our GDP shrank at an annual rate of nearly 33% last quarter, plus more than 1.4 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits last week. Has the Trump administration had any response or reaction to these numbers?
Well, I think we were expecting to hear that from the president today during his press briefing, but we didn't hear that necessarily addressed. He did allude to the fact that of the number of jobs that were being able to be retained in the last few months or so, not necessarily addressing the most recent unemployment data. But we also heard an optimistic president who said that he hopes that by this time next year that the economy will have bounced back from this coronavirus, obviously leaning into the hopes that there is some sort of vaccine and there's, plans to get the country back up and running again. But up until this point, it isn't relatively clear. Now, a lot of people speculate that the president, he's known for his tweets, and so he put out a lot of other things on Twitter today and not anything about the unemployment, alluding to things like mail-in voter fraud and things like that. It's something that he addressed today in that press briefing, but he did not necessarily address those unemployment numbers. But we did hear from Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and others who have said that they are confident that some sort of legislation will be passed eventually, just not in the next couple of days that we had been hoping for this entire time.
And Skylar, is it clear how this delay in passing a new coronavirus relief package might impact the country's ability to bounce back from these bleak economic conditions and the loss of jobs?
Well, I think people were relatively hopeful that there would at least be some sort of compensation for those lost wages because of this pandemic. I mean, you take into consideration industries like restaurants and airlines and cruise liners and things like that, a lot of tourism altogether that have been impacted so harshly by this pandemic. I mean, we've heard from the airline industry that have said that they are looking to make tens of thousands of layoffs in the coming months. And so when you take that into consideration, particularly as it pertains to the economic bounce back, we'll start to see a lot more people presumably file for unemployment and start to, seek those checks that I think a lot of people had been hoping for up until this certain time. So if they were hoping for a quick recovery in terms of that V approach of where the economy comes down and bounces back relatively quickly as the country starts to open up, I think the more that this is prolonged in terms of the government helping out those millions of Americans who are in need, I think that'll start to more so than anything else if there is a relatively quick bounce back at any point altogether here, Elaine.
All right, Skylar Henry at the White House for us. Skylar, always good to see you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Elaine.